President of the West Boca Community Council. Ellen Winnicott, Vice President. I see Elliot Burns is on, and I apologize if I'm missing other council members. But thank, of course, the West Boca Community Council Board of Directors for always being out there for the residents and attending so many meetings. During this past month, we've had the opportunity to meet with Commissioner Sachs on several occasions. One, we met with Chief DeVito. We looked at the new fire equipment that's coming in. I'll let him talk a little bit about that. We also met to discuss the issues that we have on Lyons Road between Escondido and Arborwood and all the other communities that are on Lyons Road that have issues of getting in and out of their communities, and trying to come up with a responsible fix so that the residents can get out of their community and so that the traffic continues to flow down Lyons Road without any major issues. Again, Commissioner Sachs and I, we met out there, we took pictures, and I know she's on that. I know she's on the road department, and we expect to have another meeting very soon to discuss what they've come up with. She's made suggestions regarding reducing medians, changing the red light by Arborwood for the fire station so that it might alleviate some of that backup that Arborwood is experiencing. And then, of course, we have not given up our fight, and Commissioner Sachs is backing us on the fight to get a red light at Escondido and the community across the street where there have been so many accidents, unnecessary accidents, I might add, and that a red light was proven to work when they were widening the road and they put in a temporary red light. So we're still working on that, and Commissioner Sachs is still meeting with the road department and engineering to find out what we need to do to make that road safe for everybody. Commissioner Sachs, we've also discussed with her, I'm sure everybody has read in the newspaper and heard from their neighbors or on Facebook or whatever, that Amazon is looking to put in a distribution center in the Ag Reserve, which of course it doesn't meet the Ag Reserve requirements, something that we currently we're not supporting unless something changes. I've had the opportunity to meet with Beth Rappaport, who's with on the meeting tonight, and also the president of COBRA, our sister organization. We've met, and we will certainly stay in touch because that is in COBRA's backyard. So we'll be staying in touch on how we help them and best serve them. We, of course, have been working on the vaccine. We've sent letters in conjunction with COBRA and the Delray Alliance. We've sent to the governor, our county commissioners, and everybody that we can to see how on earth we can get everybody vaccinated and safe in West Boca. And I'm going to let everybody speak and update. I don't want to jump in and say something that's not correct. Terry Mitzi from Kelly Skidmore's office is here tonight, and she can speak on what they're doing. So we're also broadcasting this on Facebook tonight. So, and I know Fred Hadley's on here. He's broadcasting it on Facebook. So since we've started doing that and posting our meetings on Facebook, not only have we captured a larger audience through our Zoom meetings, rather than when we were in person, we've also captured a lot more people on Facebook, and a lot of people that can't attend at 5:30 or 7 o'clock, whatever times our meetings were, they've been able to watch the video on Facebook. So we're going to continue to do this. I don't know if anybody goes on our Facebook page. I know a lot of people go, but I mean on tonight's meeting. Tell your neighbors, your community, that we're always posting stuff on Facebook, whether it's, Monday was President's Day. Remember, this solid waste authorities still continue to pick up trash. That was a big question people had. Do they put their trash out? But any information that we get, we try and keep up to date on Facebook, as well as we've been updating our website. So now I would like to welcome Chief DeVito. He's awake, and he can give us an update on fire rescue and how we can help him. And he has, I've been fortunate enough to work with him since he's been here, and we're getting some stuff done, and I'm happy about that. We have a good relationship. So, Chief, do you want to give us an update what's going on?
Absolutely. First of all, I want to say that Sherry for inviting me to come over to this meeting and speak with all of you. I've been in Boca for about a year now. I spent a lot of my time in Delray and Boynton Beach. And when I got promoted, I came over here, which is great because I'm 8 minutes from home. So I'm able to respond to anything that we need in this section of town. A couple of good, exciting things that are going on. Monday, we're putting a new truck in service. You've all probably seen the ladder truck that we have at 57. It's Lions Road and Palmetto. We are getting rid of the old truck finally, and we're putting a brand new truck come Monday. So it's exciting for us because it has all the new up-to-date stuff that's on it, both for us and for the public. The second thing that we're putting in service shortly is going to be a jet ski over in South County Park. Okay. With some of the drownings that we've had out in South County, especially by the amphitheater, we're making progress on capabilities. And there's also a ski park in South County Park that a lot of people don't realize is there. So we're putting a jet skiing service. It's going to be located over by West Boca High School. So it's going to have a quick response in that area. So God forbid somebody was to go missing in that pond or in that canal, we'll be able to respond there. As far as helping out your communities, one thing I learned doing the Christmas Santa Parade with Sherry is I learned some of the developments and some of the issues with parking. We addressed some of it right away. A lot of people parking in cul-de-sacs or on the opposite sides of the street from each other. Unlike cars, our trucks are pretty wide. So when we're responding to a house, we can't get down some of these streets without taking mirrors off. So what I've done is I've met with my GIS people that do all the mapping, and I'm pulling all the response times for all of your communities. I'm also pulling who responds to your communities. So if I can, because over time, you guys have grown so much that the old response zones, which station goes to your development, they've gotten a little overwhelmed. So I'm going to go look at some statistics and see where I can make improvements for you folks. The biggest thing that I ask is that we remind our residents, if you're going to park on each side of the street on the shoulder, just don't park across the street from each other. For some reason, they want to park in front of their houses and they don't care that there's another car that's 15 feet away. And of course, until they're the ones that call 911, it's not a big deal to them. One thing that we met with Commissioner Sachs about was the preemption that she really, really, really wants to get going on in City of Boca or the unincorporated Boca. This will reduce our response time to your residents probably by about a minute to a minute and a half. With Palm Trade, we're trying to get on board with them. They're the ones that have the grant for it. Preemption is when our lights are on and we are going down one of these roads, it'll automatically turn that light green for us. So traffic that is there will proceed through the light instead of us pushing everybody through an intersection. It also works in the way that if I put on my right blinker or my left blinker, it'll clear that lane, left or right, so that we're able to make the turn or get through the intersection. So these are exciting things that we've always wanted to do, but with Sherry's help and with Commissioner Sachs here now, we're going to make these things, we're going to bring them to fruition and make these things a reality instead of a wish. So I look forward to anything that you guys need. Sherry's got my number. You guys can always reach out to me directly, and whatever you guys want, I will work on.
Chief, one thing that I failed to mention, and that I know that you know that this is important to me as well as the residents in West Boca, and Commissioner Sachs is working on that, is our old dilapidated fire stations that need to be rebuilt for not just aesthetically, but for the health of the firefighters, and because the amount of money that we spend in taxes, we certainly are deserving of a decent place for our firefighters to be. And we know we've looked at where we would move fire stations. We know we have land behind the library, which is the council's wish that we could utilize that space in the future for a youth center and for a government center, that we could go and pay our tax bill there, or the water, as well as have something for the youth of the community to use. So, Chief, we appreciate your help and always meeting with us. It's much appreciated. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Next, Captain Moss, do you want to give us an update?
Sure. It's been obviously about a year, so I'm not going to give a year of updates, but hello everyone. Good to see those familiar faces, at least online. First, since probably the last meeting, we have a new executive officer in West Boca, and that's Jason Johnson. You can see him hopefully on your screen. He's there. He took the place of Lieutenant Dieter Joseph, got promoted. So Jason is with us now. He grew up in West Boca, so he's very familiar with what goes on there, which is great. Some of the things more recently that we've been involved in is we assisted Century Village when they got their 5,000 COVID vaccine doses, of kind of keeping the peace over there, and it worked out well. That was great. I think it was Department of Health that put that together and got a lot of people vaccinated over in Century Village. Crime statistic wise in West Boca for 2021, so far we're doing very well. 2020 was not a bad year, but so far across the board, our statistics have been reduced as compared to where they were last year. Our biggest complaint remains is traffic. The volume of cars and certain groups of cars, like sometimes groups that race up and down streets and so forth like that are out there. And I can tell you, we get a lot of complaints, some from the community council. Thanks for letting us know. A lot of them are west of 441 over by South County Regional Park. And people are on top of it. We've had at least 3 or 4 special details over the past few months targeting.
Lieutenant Johnson, you want to say hi?
Yeah, how's everybody doing? I'm Jason Johnson, the new executive officer here in West Boca. I look forward to meeting everybody on the screen here and much more. I've already met a few of you, and I'm happy to be down here and working with everybody.
We're happy to have you. And I'm sure we'll see a lot more of you. Next, Terry Mitzi from Representative Skidmore's office is attending tonight, and I'm sure that Terry can give us an update what's going on with the vaccine and what Representative Skidmore's office is doing to help us.
Hi there, everybody. Miss all of you. So I'm going to give you the latest update about vaccines. Forgive me if you already know some of this or if it's changed, because sometimes it changes all day long. Palm Beach County Publix was given the exclusive right to give out the vaccines, but that's kind of changed because there are a lot of communities that don't have a Publix in Palm Beach County. So the 67 Publix supermarkets are still offering the vaccine. Tomorrow, by the way, their registration is on Wednesday and Friday mornings, starting at 7 in the morning. But tomorrow morning, the registration has been canceled because the vaccines couldn't be shipped due to the weather conditions wherever they were coming from. So Friday should be a day to start calling again to make your appointment. And anyone who has an appointment at Publix tomorrow, that will not be affected. You will still be able to go have your vaccination at Publix tomorrow, but you can't call in. Sherry, do you want me to give any information like the addresses, or should I put those in the chat room? The email addresses.
You know what, Terry, if you want to email them to me, I'll put them up on our website as well as on Facebook.
Okay, that would be better than me trying to give web pages over the phone, over the Zoom. The healthcare district is no longer letting people register at that CHD 50 feedback. They closed that site down because they had over 200,000 registrations for the vaccine. However, they're now sending out emails to ask people who sign up for that if they still need the vaccine or want it, and they're on their waiting list. And those vaccines are being given at the fairgrounds and South County Civic Center, and also at Palm Beach State College and Palm Beach Gardens. So that continues, and as soon as the health district of Palm Beach County receives more vaccines, they will open that page up again so that people can sign up. The county is pretty well prepared, it appears, and it looks like the fairgrounds can vaccinate as many as 7,000 people a day. It sounds like a lot, but they don't have the vaccine, so they can't do it until they get the vaccine. If anyone knows any residents of the Glades area, there is a Friday and Saturday 10 to 4 o'clock, no reservation. This is really intended for members of the Glades community who can't really get to other communities or Publix. They are not going to turn you away if you drive there. It is an hour and a half each way. Plus, there's no reservation ahead of time, so you might have a long wait. But if you know of someone in the Glades, this is in Pahokee, and I'll give that information to Sherry. By the way, when you go online for Publix, you can register as many as 4 people at a time. And let's see what else. Jupiter Medical Center is giving the vaccine to people under 65 who have serious medical conditions. The phone number, well, I'll give that to Sherry also, but JFK is also going to start giving vaccines, I believe, next week. It could start as early as this week, but possibly next week, to people who are under 65. And this requires a doctor's prescription. So the doctors are really the ones who have to set this up. But anyone who has a condition that is serious and puts you in that category, you give a call to your doctor with the information that I share with Sherry, and then your doctor can hopefully get you a vaccine, no longer just at Jupiter, but at the JFK facilities.
And the doctors will call and make the appointment for you. Is that what you're saying?
They haven't told us. They haven't told us. I think, I don't have any more information about the JFK. It says that they're going to get 600 doses, and that's all I know. And so 600 is not so many, considering the whole population under 65 with medical conditions. So, Sherry, I'm going to try and find out more about that tomorrow. I'll send this to you tomorrow after I get an update in the morning.
Okay.
Meeting at 8:30 in the morning about this. So anything I know that's updated from tonight, I'll give to Sherry tomorrow.
Right.
And then I think that's all. Oh, there's one other thing, and it does affect all the HOAs and condo associations and co-ops, of course. There will be a new site, not yet announced, where if you're interested in having the mobile units come to your association, as they did at Century Village, then this is being set up now. I believe the biggest problem right now is nobody knows how much vaccine is going to be sent to our county at any given time. So this is really the holdup, but there are things lined up and ready to go as soon as they know that the vaccine is coming. And finally, Walmart and Winn-Dixie will not Palm Beach County as of now, and FEMA does not have plans for opening a site in Palm Beach County as of now. That's my whole report. If anyone has a question.
I have a question. Terry, at your direction, which is always so current, I appreciate it. We registered some communities as PRDs, points of distribution. Is that list still valid, or has something changed?
Actually, that list is valid and full, and the county doesn't want to keep adding, because things are so fluid. They don't want to keep adding names and associations to their list. And so for now, anyone who is registered or written to that address that we gave you so much about 3 weeks ago,
Right.
Those are on a waiting list for the vaccine to be available. And then when that waiting list is down considerably, then they'll open that up again with a new site for you to go to, as opposed to the gentleman who was taking all of that information before.
Do those communities know if they're on a waiting list?
If they registered, they should be on the waiting list.
Thank you.
Now, I know from personal experience, when we were told the county registration list, and I did it for myself and quite a few people, I never heard a word about it. And then last week I got the email saying, do you still want your vaccine? So I was there, but they just didn't have the system set up properly to respond to everyone. I'll ask that question at the meeting tomorrow.
Thank you for everything you do. You are so calm about it. I appreciate it.
I'm sure.
Thank you, Mitzi. And last, before we get on with our program, I want to introduce Beth Rappaport, who is the president of COBRA, which is the sister organization to West Boca. Beth represents West Boynton. Beth?
Hi, how are you? Thank you for having me tonight. I appreciate it.
We're happy to have you. And like I said earlier, we are more than willing and very happy to help COBRA with the Ag Reserve.
We appreciate that. Thank you.
And without further ado, I would like to introduce Lou Caplan, who I'm sure everybody knows, but for those of you that don't, Lou is the partner at Sachs and Caplan. He's chairman of the Community Associations Practice Group. Lou is board certified in condominium and plan development law and practices in the area of community associations law, representing condominiums and homeowner associations. He brings to his clients extensive experience in his chosen field through specialization in the areas of arbitration and matters before the Florida Division of Land Sales and Condominiums, covenant enforcement, association document, and contract drafting and revisions. Mr. Caplan is a frequent lecturer and columnist on community association matters, contributing to both the Palm Beach County Bar Association and the Community Associations Institute. He has lectured on bulk rate cable television and telecommunications acts relating to possible restrictions on satellite dishes and antenna by both condominium and homeowner association. And for many of you that probably don't know this, Lou was on our board of directors when we were fighting University Drive and helped us to successfully accomplish that. So welcome, Lou. It's nice to see you. Finally, it's been a long time.
It's nice to see everybody. That's an old bio.
So give us an update.
I'm not nearly as impressive anymore. No, I'm too depressed, Sherry. I wish I had my fake ID from when I was 17 years old because we could get the vaccine. But right now I'm not old enough, apparently. But Terry, thank you for that information. So today it was kind of a, ask the lawyer kind of a setup. So I'm going to open it up for questions pretty quickly. But the whole issue is that we're really kind of talking about meetings during COVID. And I first of all, I'd be remiss if I didn't. There's a lot of people I know and familiar faces, so it is nice to see everybody. It's really nice. It's been too long. So the issue here is that we want to talk about kind of having how we handle meetings during COVID and the like. And I think the first thing everybody needs to understand is where are we at? And currently the state of emergency remains in place, state of Florida. So the state of emergency is still it doesn't expire until February 27th. I'd be hard pressed to think that it wouldn't be extended, although I can't guarantee that. But notwithstanding, because the state of emergency is still in place for the state, that means that the emergency powers, both under the Condominium Act and the Homeowners Association Act, remain in play. And part of the emergency powers that an association has is actually rescheduling, canceling meetings and the like, having some flexibility. If you have a meeting and you can't get full participation, it still allows you to follow up with your constituency and kind of let them know what happened at the meeting. So the point is that the traditional meeting where we need to make sure we have a location for people to come and cast their ballot, etc. We are in a pandemic. We have emergency powers. We do not have to provide that right now. I think the theme would be, let's try to be as close as we can to having a meeting the old-fashioned way, but we don't have to have a meeting the old-fashioned way. It can be by Zoom if it's difficulty in letting owners participate the way we normally would. Something, we're going to have to live with that, and I'd be hard-pressed to believe any judge or any arbitrator is going to condemn us, as long as, and I think this is the most important thing, as long as we have not disenfranchised anyone's ability to vote. So I think that's the important thing we need to learn from this all. The key to having a successful election and the like, even if it's virtual, is making sure that we don't disenfranchise anyone who wants to vote. And that's what arbitrators look at. So to the extent that we might have to have a robust second notice that tells people, if you want to participate in the election, you need to electronically vote. Here's how you do it. You need to send in your limited proxy. Here's how you do it. You need to get that proxy in by a certain date and the like. Here's how you do it. As long as it's very clear, so no one can point and say, hey, wait a second, you left out a whole group of people that should have been able to vote, but they were not able to vote. As long as we kind of bridge those gaps, the election, the meeting is going to be fine. Just also when it comes to, one of the difficulties during a pandemic is getting enough people to attend a meeting. And if we're not doing it by Zoom, or we don't send in limited proxy, or if we don't do it by electronic votes, when you vote electronically, you're deemed to be present. So that's not normally an issue. Zoom, you're not deemed to be present, so we make people send in their limited proxy and the like. The beauty, though, for condos, and for those of you who actually live in condos, or you're on boards for your condos, when it comes to the election, you don't have to have a quorum in order for it to be a proper election. You just need to have 20% of the eligible voters cast a vote in a condo election for it to be a valid election. So as such, we're a lot less worried when we have annual meetings for condos, because if you don't have a quorum, that's okay, as long as we get enough of those secret absentee ballots. And again, we need to make it clear. Say, you need to send your secret absentee ballot, you need to get it to us prior to the start of the meeting, because we're not going to allow people to come down and hand their ballots in and the like. It's going to be completely virtual. So again, I think to me, the instructions that we use when we send out the second notice is probably the most important thing. When it comes to board meetings, which is also, I guess, part of the topic, board meetings are not all that different. I see a lot of associations, I believe they're going to continue to have Zoom-type board meetings, because it kind of allows a lot of participation, and not everybody has to show up at the school, or at the office, or at the clubhouse. Board members have always had the ability to basically attend board meetings remotely, including by telephone, as long as they can be heard and they can hear what's going on. So from a board meeting perspective, Zoom's not all that different. The difficulty with Zoom and other virtual mechanisms is that it doesn't quite allow you the same full participation of the members. Owners have a right to speak at board meeting, whether it's condos, whether it's HOAs. They have the right to participate on agenda items. And during a pandemic, based on the emergency powers, based on the flexibility, based on what we believe the interpretation of 72316 is for homeowners associations, if we can't allow someone to speak, but we can allow them to send in an email, maybe pose a question under the chat, or not even allow them to speak because we're just not able to do it as we were learning our way through these remote meetings. Again, I think that's going to be deemed to be good enough. I don't think that everything is going to be overturned because we weren't perfect. It is a pandemic. We need, again, to show that we've done the best we can to at least allow members to participate to the extent that they can hear what's going on. If they can't necessarily ask questions in real time, well, what is our alternative? Maybe they can send in some questions by email in advance. Doing those things, to me, I think all of that is going to be good enough. So I do think there's flexibility. I don't think it's flexibility to the point where associations should take advantage of the fact and say, okay, well, Lou Caplan says we can really cancel meetings, so let's not have a meeting for 2 or 3 years, and let's keep this board in place. That's probably not the way to do it. But again, there is flexibility. I think there's good practical ways to handle these meetings. I never was a big fan of electronic voting, but electronic voting is great during a pandemic because it allows you to vote and also be in attendance at the meeting. So that's really helpful, and that's been helpful for some associations. A lot of associations kind of I've had associations that said, well, they never opened up the clubhouse over at one of these large communities. So it said they never opened the clubhouse, therefore, we haven't had a meeting in 13 months. I don't think we can do that anymore. I think that worked for the first 3 or 4 months of the pandemic. But at this point, I do think associations should be able to, especially those with management companies, because the management companies have become experts on Zoom and these types of virtual meetings. I think associations should strive to have meetings on a somewhat consistent basis. I think they should strive to have their annual meeting if they have not already. And again, I'd rather see you try and do the best you can and come close to a proper meeting than not do it at all and hide behind the pandemic. So I think we've reached the point where we really should, those communities that have not had meetings at all and the board has kind of rolled over, I think we need to kind of start thinking about definitely having meetings sooner than later. I think you're behind the times on that. As far as rollover boards, rollover boards are great. You don't have a quorum, we don't have an election for an HOA or for whatever happens, or we have a lack of participation, or this is the one I hear all the time now. Well, nobody was able to get their notice packages in Canada in time to send in their intent to be candidate forms. So nobody in Canada is apparently going to be on a board of directors this year unless they're holdovers from last year. And I think there's some truth to that. Apparently the mail in and out of places like Canada has been very difficult. So what we did in one association, because they have about 70% Canadians in their building, we actually postponed the annual meeting and election after we sent out the second notice. And we said, okay, we have been advised, so they emailed everybody that we have been advised that people are not getting the mail, and as such, you're not going to be able to get your vote in time, and we don't want to disenfranchise anybody. So we postponed the meeting by about 3 weeks, just after we had already sent out the second notice and just advised everybody. To me, that's fine. I mean, again, isn't that better than not allowing 70% of your people to participate in the election? Wouldn't we all rather be in front of an arbitrator saying, yes, we have the right under the emergency powers to cancel meetings? Well, we just simply postponed it 3 weeks in order to facilitate and allow these people in Canada, which makes up 70% of our population, to get their ballots in on time. To me, I would rather have that argument in front of an arbitrator. Because again, arbitrators are always concerned about, did you somehow disenfranchise people from their opportunity to vote? And so I think we do the best we can. Again, we still have the emergency powers. State of emergency is still in place. The emergency powers, the way the statute's worded, we believe that even if they lift the state of emergency, it doesn't mean that day, snap your fingers, and we no longer have emergency powers. The emergency powers continue, and our ability to basically determine who gets to use the facilities, whether we need to cancel meetings, whether we need to postpone them, I believe that those continue on for a reasonable period of time in order to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the residents. So don't view the lifting of the emergency powers as a cutoff date for you to still have some flexibility. It's not a cutoff date. It will make it harder to defend when you have some of the people in the community saying, hey, I can't believe we haven't had the pool open for 9 months already. Why am I not being able to get my, go to the cafe every day? I mean, those people are going to have a little bit more leverage to kind of make those arguments once the state of emergency is lifted. But from a legal standpoint, we believe that you still have some extended emergency powers, notwithstanding the day that the emergency powers are lifted. They don't all go away. You still have the right, and I would argue the obligation, to do what's necessary to help protect the health, safety, and welfare of your residents. So that's kind of the intro into the whole topic of kind of discussing meetings and how you handle these things during a pandemic. I don't know that anybody has it figured out entirely, but again, I think my motto and the way we do it here is that we try to get it as close as we can and make sure no matter what we do is we don't disenfranchise anybody who has an opportunity to vote. So why don't we do questions? Raise your hand and then I'll recognize you and then you can unmute yourself. I'm not going to be, I kind of like to do it the old-fashioned way. So if anybody has a question or a comment, let's kind of get some, let's kind of get a nice discussion going. Uh-oh. Hold on, I'm going page 2. A lot of you I know, so if I don't get a question out of any of you, I can call you. All right, go ahead, Margie. But you have to unmute. You only did half of it. I said question and unmute. Actually, Scott might have to unmute.
Yeah. I think we're gonna unmute Marge.
Scott, you can unmute everybody if you want, just everybody needs to self-mute themselves or stay quiet when they're not answering the question.
Hi.
Hi.
So you see, as far as the near future, and I agree with you that we'll probably continue with Zoom meetings and a lot of this going on the way we're doing right now. Is that what you would consider for the near future?
Yeah, I mean, I think Zoom meetings for board meetings is gonna go on and on and on. I think the only difference is, since we've seen so many of these horror stories, that people are gonna start wearing pants more often when they're on a Zoom meeting. God, you know.
And check their filter.
Right, check their filter, right. But no,
I am not a cat.
Right, avoid the guys. I have seen a lot of the people's pets over the last several months. But I think Zoom meetings are going to stay pretty popular. Because, but I think what's going to happen is that we're going to need to make sure that at some point, when we are in a position where we really could have in-person meetings, while we still continue to have Zoom meetings, we need to do a better job at making sure we allow for participation so owners can speak on agenda items. You know, at some point, we can't just kind of use the pandemic. If the pandemic is 6 months in the rearview mirror, yet we still like Zoom, we probably can't use the pandemic as an excuse not to allow owners to speak. We have to probably get better at that kind of stuff.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Lou, I'll ask you a question that this has been brought up in numerous communities that we manage, is that the board rollovers, that you don't have a quorum for whatever reason, which we know is not uncommon, especially in HOAs. So the board doesn't roll over and say there were 3 people that were up for re-election and you don't have a quorum. Those 3 people that were up for re-election, if there was a quorum and they were elected, they would be elected for a 2-year term. Now they're holdover. Are they elected for? Do they stay for 2 years or only until the next annual meeting?
No. We treat holdovers or rollover board members just they extend to the next annual meeting and election. And as such, at the following annual meeting and election, you would have lost your stagger. But then we'll say that now you have 5 people running instead of 3. And we say that the 3 that receive the highest number of votes will get elected for a 2-year term. The 2 that are elected but do not receive as high number of votes, they'll get elected for the 1-year term, and that will reinstate the stagger. But let's understand a couple things about kind of rollover boards or holdover. I call it holdover boards normally. The way the Homeowners Association Act reads that if you have a pre-call for candidates and your documents do not require that you have nominations from the floor, if you have 3 people running for 3 positions, or 2 people running for 3 positions, notwithstanding that you do not have a quorum for the annual meeting, they will be deemed to be elected. They added that because of what was happening is that you have 3 people running for 3 spots. The community would say, hey, we only have 3 people running for 3 spots, so they're going to be elected. And then nobody showed up and sent in their proxies. We didn't have a quorum, and then those 3 new people didn't get elected because the old board held over. They changed the statute. So now if it's a pre-call for candidates, let's say 40 days, 50 days, or like condos, 60 days before the election, you send out saying if you want to be a candidate, send in your intent to be a candidate form. And the documents do not specifically require that you have nominations from the floor. Again, 3 running for 3 spots, they are deemed to be elected, even if you don't end up with a quorum. As such, you don't have to worry about the holdover doctrine in that scenario. For condos, you don't have to have a quorum, as I mentioned earlier, in order to have a proper election. As long as 20% of the eligible voters cast a vote in the election, they are elected. It's a valid election. That's why for condos, the first order of business in your annual meeting is always going to be the election, because it's the only thing on your annual meeting that doesn't require a quorum, so you don't have to wait to determine whether you even have enough proxies or enough people in attendance to have a quorum. So again, for condos, 20% participate. It's a valid election. HOAs, if you have a pre-call for candidates and no requirement to have nominations on the floor, 3 people running for 3 spots, no quorum, they are still deemed to be elected. And in that scenario, Sherry, they would be elected for the 2 years under that stagger. It would just be a proper election in that scenario.
Anybody else have any questions?
You can go outside the topic. It can be free advice day. You get what you pay as I always say, you get what you pay for, but feel free. Go ahead, John. John?
Hi, I guess I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
I can.
Nice to meet you, Lou. I want to tell you that your firm has represented me in different capacities for probably 20 years, but you and I have never met. So nice to meet you over Zoom.
You too. And although I saw your name recently, it's nice to see you, John.
Good to be seen. Good to see you. I don't want to get down in the weeds too much, but I did want to say that, I've participated in a number of municipal hearings by Zoom, and some of which, over the last 8 to 10 months have actually been quasi-judicial proceedings. So, in terms of the validity of, the Zoom meetings and their legality, I think we're good there. By not getting down in the weeds, I guess what I wanted to say is, there's sometimes are presentation problems, because usually when I'm in a hearing, a public hearing, I'm making a presentation and I'm controlling whatever the audio video is, so that I can do my presentation slide by slide in the way I need to. I guess tonight, we're a little more relaxed because, we're all unmuted, we're all practicing good etiquette and raising our hands. And I could just share my screen, but in a larger meeting, I think that might be a problem. So if I've noticed anything, and I guess this is a comment more than a question, if I've noticed anything, it's that, the ability to present and share sometimes needs to be worked out in a Zoom meeting.
John, I agree with you to some extent. I mean, I agree with you. That can be a difficulty. But don't you sense that there's, I find that we're seeing more participation at Zoom board meetings than I ever saw at a regular board meeting where we ask people to show up in real, in person and in real time. I think Zoom has really provided an opportunity. I've been trying to be very careful, and I know we all have. But I've handled a few annual meetings where, I'll say I will be in your giant ballroom if you only have 2 or 3 other people there. So I've gone there where I'm on Zoom with my mask, and I've got 2 people doing the counting and stuff. And I look at the Zoom, and I see that there are 300 plus people who are attending by Zoom. And I've been to their annual meetings in the past, and I don't remember ever seeing more than 40 people at the annual meeting. So I do think it affects the ability to do a presentation. I do think the opportunity to do the screen sharing and the like, is not as easy. I do think that, yes, we end up in the middle of every Zoom, somebody's talking to their friend on the phone, they're not muted, and it does kind of make things difficult. But I do think it has increased in some situations the participation, or at least the attendance, maybe not the participation. But I think you're right, John. I think the presentation aspect is not as easy.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Lou, that, certainly attendance has gone up with Zoom, and that's a good thing, to be more accessible to folks. It's just sometimes, if you're in a public hearing and you're up there speaking and you're kind of under pressure and you got to be talking to a guy and say, go to slide 6, please. It gets to be a little bit difficult. But,
right. Well, I'm doing something tomorrow, and I'm going to have another attorney because it's going to be a Q&A, and I'm going to have another attorney from the office kind of doing it with me, so he'll be able to, at least while I'm kind of doing the presentation, because it's more of a board certification, so it's an actual presentation where he's at least going to be able to monitor the chat and monitor, so he can kind of ask the questions of me, so we don't have the interruption of me trying to look at the chat questions and also trying to present, kind of an educational presentation. I mean, so you kind of figure it out, but yeah, that's not the easiest part. But I do think it's great that it's allowed for kind of increased participation.
Agreed.
Hi, Janet.
Can I interject something that I think moving forward that yes, we've had a lot more participation at board meetings, and I think that the managers, the management companies, it's been a learning curve for all of us, how to share the screen, how to put up the whiteboard, how to do notes. We're getting much better at it. We try every meeting. I mean, the West Boca Community Council, if you attended the last meeting where I had the issue where I hit, I think it was stop the audio or whatever. I had no idea that I was taking me down off of the meeting. But anyways, from each one of these meetings, we're learning, and the managers from all the different companies, we all talk and how one was successful in running this meeting, how they did that meeting, the meeting notices, how different they are, going out, encouraging people to attend via Zoom, board members coming to the conference room or to an outdoor area to hold a meeting, yet we still broadcast it via Zoom. So the residents, so in many ways, it's been very good. Do we miss the human interaction? Absolutely. But we're getting better. And of course, all the managers and board of directors always welcome constructive criticism, how we can do better. And especially moving forward, because I think we're going to see a lot more meetings via Zoom and online. And I think we're going to start to see and organize to be able to vote electronically, which I don't think has been something that a lot of us took very seriously. It's intense to try and get everybody registered to ensure, and I'm still not sure how to do that, but I know, and I'm sure Sachs and Caplan are getting up to speed on this, how we're going to do that going forward.
Yeah, and I will tell you, the electronic voting, basically what the board does is your lawyer, whoever it is, will draft up a board resolution. The board will approve that board resolution. Then they'll send out basically consent forms where people have the ability to consent to electronic voting as well as to consent to email notice, because it's really hard to do electronic voting when you're not accepting email notice. It just makes sense. And then you get those back, you get them back by a certain time, and then it becomes great. And just because you have signed up for electronic voting does not mean you are forced to vote electronically. You still have the ability, and you might have to say, I'm not going to vote electronically. Even when we're allowed to come to meetings in person, you can say, I'm going to go to the meeting and I'm going to vote. I'm either going to send in my proxy or I'm going to show up at the meeting and vote a ballot. So just because you've signed up and opted to allow for yourself to electronically vote doesn't mean you have to. So I think it does create some nice flexibility. I see that it's really helpful on big kind of votes, amended and restated documents. We've done several mergers where we're merging, clubs into their POAs. And those it's important there. I also think that down the road, it might help for some of these communities that are apathetic and never have a quorum, because it'll give those communities an opportunity to again, if somebody participates by voting electronically, then they're also deemed to be in attendance for quorum purposes. We've got lots of people who never show up at a meeting. But they might participate that way. Now,
can you explain how the electronic voting goes? So they send in a document that says, yes, I want to vote electronically. The verification process, how exactly do you vote electronically? Do you just email in your ballot, or is there software? How does that work exactly?
It depends on the company. Simple as getting an email and then filling out that ballot by email, sending it in, and then it has a cutoff date. And then when we have the election, we count the 40 paper ballots where people send them in, and then we also add the printout from the electronic voting. And it's like 20 people voted for Harry, 20 people voted for Jimmy, 20 people voted for Shirley, and then they're like all excited because nobody voted for anybody else. And then we get the electronic voting, and 600 people have voted for Renee, and 580 have voted. Next thing you know, Shirley, Harry, and whatever, Jimmy, just lost the election. But a lot of times that's what happens. The electronic vote count is just a printout based on the cutoff date, which normally is just like the day before the election. It really is pretty simple. I mean, each form is going to be a little different. I haven't looked at that many forms because I'm more in charge of drafting up the resolution by the board to basically where the board allows for electronic voting. And that's the first step. The board needs to do that resolution. And then we send out a pretty simple form where people have the right to opt in. So
it's not different software. It's just really via email. Like if you were to go online and fill out a form,
it's easy.
There's how's the verification? How do you know? Is it the email? And what if you're voting by secret ballot?
I believe it's done through the email verification, but it also may be done through the form, and the form they have to identify. The verification is not a problem. It's really, I think you'll find that it's pretty simple for the medical company. So it's not something that either The reason that you don't want electronic voting, and this is going to sound terrible, but it's not. This is the reality, and it's okay. Is sometimes electronic voting makes it a little bit too easy to vote, and we've got plenty of communities that they like it better when people don't participate, because that does allow boards to roll over, etc. I'm not going to say that's necessarily a strategy, but we've got plenty of communities where the status quo is fine with them, and they don't want to make it too easy for the constituency to have the right to vote, or to have the ability, not they all have the right to vote, have the ability to vote. I mean, let's be honest, we've got communities where there may be age gaps, there may be, one wants to move in a different direction. One doesn't want to spend a lot of money, and another one says, wait a second, we've got large lots in this community, let's spend some money because we're going to get that money back in the increased value. So you have kind of, it's just like the world, you have kind of different views. And there are plenty of associations that don't want to have electronic voting because it makes it just too easy for a election to result in a change in the board. So we like it the old-fashioned way where people have to kind of show up. And a lot of times that just results in a lack of participation, apathy, and a rollover board. That's sometimes a strategy. Yes, go ahead, Rosalind.
Yes, I'm president of my HOA, and we have a big problem with parking on the streets. We own our own streets, so they're narrower than regular county streets, and people just don't care, and they park on both sides of the street. And the garbage trucks have a hard time getting through because there's cars on both sides. So we were looking into towing, but we were warned that that's a real dog's breakfast if we damage their car and blah, blah, blah. So we were looking at maybe booting. Have you heard of that, where they boot the car so they can't move the car and they have to pay to have the boot moved?
Yeah. I mean, we see that in downtown Delray and places like that. They do the booting, and then you have to pay a significant amount of money to unboot. And that's kind of what gets everyone's attention. I think booting's an option. I think the whole key to towing or booting, it's proper notice. And you got to make sure that you've got this significant notice, because that's the issue. Now, Rosalind, you're right. The reason that towing is tough is because every judge has had the car towed at some time in their life. So they've been waiting for the opportunity to overturn a tow and stick it to the towing company of the association. So you got to make sure you do it right. And the key to any towing is proper notice, whether it's personal notice, whether it's based on signage. Signage is sufficient if there's only one entrance into the community, types of things. So to me, I think you've got some options, but you need to make sure that you've got the proper signage and the like, and the notice. I will tell you this, that I've been involved in cases where the association put a leaflet or something on the person's windshield, and when it gets in front of the judge, they always claim that it must have blown away. I never got it. So I don't think that's the way to do it. I'm also not a big fan of putting a big sticker in front, right on the front windshield, and making it a dangerous condition that when they try to drive to the office to complain to the manager, they hit a fire hydrant. I don't want to make an unsafe condition. I like to do it based on signage, but then again, some communities don't love having signage throughout the property about towing vehicles and all. I would probably err and kind of look at it on a signage basis. I do also think that if you're going to push about parking on the streets, and if you're going to make that an issue, then you really do need to enforce it, because if you tell people you can't park on the streets, then you don't enforce it, and now vehicles like emergency vehicles can't get through. All of a sudden, now someone's going to say, well, wait a second, association, you made a big stink about it that you're not going to allow parking on both sides of the street, then you didn't enforce it, and as a result, that emergency vehicle couldn't get to me timely. That's how you kind of create potential lawsuits and the like. So, don't take something on unless you're going to do it. I'd rather you almost ignore it than you do it half-ass, if that's the expression.
Right, yeah, and you just mentioned something about parking on one side of the street, so that's another option, I guess, like on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, you park on that side?
I mean, yes and no, If your streets are too narrow, if your documents do not allow parking on the streets, and your streets are too narrow to allow parking on one side of the street or both sides of the streets, then you guys deciding and saying, we're gonna pass a rule allowing for parking on even side, alternate side of the street parking. Now, through a rule, you may have actually violated your declaration which says no parking, and you also may have created a dangerous condition while you think you're making a safe condition. What you're trying to avoid is people parking on both sides, so now you are deliberately allowing them to park on one side when that might not be allowed under your documents, or the streets may not be wide enough for even one side of the street parking. So before you go to alternative side of the street parking as a potential remedy, you need to look at how wide your roads are, what FDOT requires, things like that.
Right, and our docs do say no overnight parking. Doesn't say anything about daytime parking, just overnight parking.
Right, and then we get into how do we define overnight parking? Is there a definition?
Yeah, what is the time of overnight?
Yeah, well, to me, I think the board has a little bit of flexibility. I think you can stay overnight. I think that could be a board decision. 11 to 6.
11 to 6, is that what you said?
I think you can come up with something like that if your documents are silent. I think that's reasonable overnight parking.
Great. All right, thank you very much.
Sure.
Hi, Lou, this is Barbara Schumacher. I had a quick question going back to the meetings.
Hi, Barbara. Where are you?
Hi, doing good.
Good.
And going back to the meeting topic, just real quick, what is the proper notification for the residents, especially at an annual meeting where voting may incur, versus what's the minimal? And then also in these communities where more than 50% or about 50% of the people are not on the internet, is it still value added to mail notifications out to them to help encourage these people to get online?
Well, we're only going to mail. We're going to mail notification to the community unless people have signed up have signed up and agreed to have email as the form of notice. If we don't have email as the form of notice, then we're still going to send our notices out by regular mail. So we cannot choose to send things out by email only if people have not signed up to receiving notice by email as the proper form of notice. As far as the length of time for notice, and that's going to depend on condo versus HOA. For condos, if we're talking about your annual meeting and election, the statute is all governed by statute. Not less than 60 days prior to the election, we send out a first notice. It's basically a call for candidates. If somebody wants to run, they need to get that back, their intent to be a candidate for, by the 40-day prior to the annual meeting cutoff date. They have 5 additional days to get their resume in. And then anywhere between 14 and 35 days, they send out the second notice, which is the second notice which has the ballot, et cetera, et cetera. For a homeowners association, it really is going to depend on what your documents say. So you really need to look at your documents. Your documents could say notice must be not less than 2 weeks, not less than 45 and not more than 60. But again, for a homeowners association, your notice requirements are normally going to be tied into your documents. For board meetings, your notice requirements for board meetings to the residents is normally 48 hours posted notice. And that's the notice for both condo and HOA board meetings. If it's a special meeting where you're going to pass a non-emergency special assessment, you're going to amend rules regarding the use of the individual homes, like making everybody turn their post lights on at 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock. That is a rule that's going to require a 14-day notice for a homeowners association. So it really depends on what the purpose of the meeting is relative to what the notice requirements are. But when it comes to your annual meeting and membership meetings, for HOAs, that's usually tied into the documents. Condos, it's all statutory.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Jeanette?
Hi there. For board meetings on Zoom, if you allow your owners a 3-minute time limit to speak before or after the meeting, and then also allow them to post on chat, is that acceptable?
You broke up for 1 second. Say that again.
For allowing the 3-minute time limit before or after, would that be acceptable, or would it be considered whatever that is?
Disenfranchised.
Yeah, I stumbled over it too a few times. All right, here's the deal. Owners have the right to participate at board meetings on, basically speak on agenda items, comment on agenda items. Doesn't mean you have to debate with them. It doesn't mean you have to answer their question. It really is they have the right to comment and or speak on agenda items. All right. You have the right to kind of determine how long, and 3 minutes seems to be a fair rule. Here's the deal, though. If owners have the right to participate and therefore speak on agenda items for 3 minutes at the board meeting, waiting until the board meeting, at the end of the board meeting, and then adjourning the meeting and then opening it up for those comments after the meeting's been adjourned, you know, no good deed goes unpunished. You're letting them speak, but you violated the statute because you're letting them speak after the meeting's been closed, and the statute says owners have the right to speak on agenda items at the meeting. So that should take place before the meeting is adjourned. The other thing is that, you know, I'm a big proponent of letting people speak at the beginning of the meeting. Let owners participate at the beginning of the meeting. And then tell them that thank you. When we get to that item on the agenda, we'll obviously consider your thoughts. You don't have to let them speak throughout the meeting, etc. The alternative, what a lot of associations do, is they let owners speak at the end of the meeting. And they say, okay, the meeting's over. Before we close out the meeting, does anybody want to speak? If I've been sitting there for 3 hours and all I want to do is talk about the decision whether or not to move street trees, and they made a decision 2 hours into the meeting, and after the decision's been made, I finally get my chance to say, I don't want you to remove those street trees. I'm going to be frustrated. And I'm going to become what I call the recreational dissident in the community. All right? That's a nice way of saying the jerk who now wants to bust the board's chops. I think those are all legal terms. All right? You don't want to create a lot of those people. And the way you create those people is making them sit through a 3-hour meeting and not get to speak until after all the decisions have been made and after they're tired, exhausted, and it doesn't matter because the board has already voted on that issue. So that's why I suggest let them speak early. Don't debate with them. Tell them when we get to that item on the agenda, we'll definitely consider your comments.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Terry Mitzi has her hand up.
Okay. Go ahead, Terry. But you're on mute, I think. You're on mute.
Okay, hi. Hi, Lou. Nice to see you. So it's a quick question. May residents meet with an appeals committee on Zoom? Is that allowed?
I would say yes. In a pandemic, absolutely. When you say an appeals committee, I mean, are we talking about like the fining committee, the one that confirms whether or not to approve a fine or a suspension? Or are you talking about where somebody feels like they didn't get their architectural approval and the board has set up some type of a owner advocacy committee where people get to kind of revisit the decision? If you're talking about if you're talking about ways and fining and things like that, there is no requirement that board meetings be open to the membership. It's different for condos. So for me, having a Zoom meeting, let's say where the grievance committee determines whether or not to confirm a fine against somebody, I don't see why that couldn't be on Zoom.
Actually, I had something specific. It's about, it was a decision made by the board to shut down a club.
Okay.
And they were supposed to, by the documents, they're allowed to have a meeting to appeal. And they haven't been allowed that meeting. So I was just wondering if that could happen on the Zoom.
Well, hopefully it's not one of our clients, but I would say that, I mean, if they're able to have a board,
pull you back, okay?
you're able to have a board meeting where you made a decision to basically not do what people wanted,
Okay.
then what would be the rationale for not being able to have a board meeting for the appellate purpose? Doesn't seem to make it seems to be a bit inconsistent. So in that situation, there must be more to it, because I'd be hard pressed to see why they would have had the board meeting where they made the decision to shut down the club, but they wouldn't be able to hold a Zoom meeting for the purpose of having the appeal. That doesn't, it seems like, I don't know, did one day they know how to work Zoom and the next day they didn't? I would struggle. I would struggle with that inconsistency a bit.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else have a question, a comment?
A good recipe?
Actually, you know what, Lou, here's something that, I've gotten a lot of questions on, and actually I see a lot of chatter on, Nextdoor for the communities in West Boca. And that's about a lot of the communities that have not opened up their clubhouses and their pool areas. Can you make any comment on that? What they need to do, some of these communities, what do they need to do to open those clubhouses and the pools? Or, I suspect that the reason that they're closed is because their attorneys have advised them that it's a liability issue.
I don't know that attorneys are necessarily telling them that. I think the bottom line is that we're still in a state of emergency. We still got the county state of emergency is also in place, and that gets kind of re-upped every couple of weeks. So we're still in a position where we have the authority to limit access to the amenities in order to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the residents. And I think most of these boards are going out of their way to educate themselves to determine whether or not they feel it is safe for their residents to open up the facilities because they feel that they're charged with the obligation to protect the health, safety, and welfare. Now, I do know associations, they were a little bit quicker to open up things like pickleball and tennis, also golf with limitations, and that's because, it's easier to be outside. I would tell you that most communities, and I mean most by a large percentage, have not opened up their inside facilities. Most are not having indoor meetings. Most have not opened up their cafe unless their cafe is open for curbside pickup and the like. Most restaurants have not opened in some of the communities that have restaurants, although some have, and with with really good protocols. So to me, the issue really is oftentimes and early on, it's do we have the ability to truly monitor, because there was a monitoring requirement when this all first started. Do we have the ability to truly monitor? Do we have the ability to truly have protocols in place to help protect the health, safety, and welfare of the residents? And then, I'll give you an example, like the Valencias. First of all, the Valencias have great participation because people know how to use Zoom and the like, etc. Most of the Valencias have been very cautious about opening their facilities, the indoor facilities, because they want to protect the health, safety, and welfare. They're 55 in all the communities. Some of those Valencias are older than others, and the people are significantly more than 55. So they've been careful. They have the ability to be careful. In fact, one would argue the obligation to be careful because the state of emergency is still in place. So, I mean, I don't think that they should be. The message to me is always that I think associations have had to make throughout is that, hey, continue to social distance, continue to follow the necessary protocols. The associations want to keep, make sure they have robust cleaning in place and the like. But I don't know that associations need to feel that there is now some overriding need or requirement that they open up their indoor facilities. I think that every right to continue to be careful about that in order to avoid kind of spreading the disease. I think things will change. I think it's great when we get a certain level of people vaccinated. I can't wait for my opportunity. But I think those are things that these boards are going to look at. They're going to look at the numbers. They look at the dashboard on a daily basis, a lot of these board members from these communities. They've been so diligent about it. Very, it's kind of almost inspiring. They really have taken the obligation to protect their residents very, very seriously. And I don't see, and I see while some of them are maybe opening up tennis and pickleball a couple more days a week, most of them are not rushing up to open up the indoor facilities because they're still convinced that that's not the best thing for their constituency. And they still have the protection and the ability to do that, really under the statute and their emergency powers. I don't know if that answered your question, but that's kind of, I don't think there's any rush or obligation that they get everything open right now.
Okay.
But I will tell you this, it's not always the attorney's always supposed to be the most conservative one in the room. You ask the attorney, should I jump in this lake? The attorney obviously has to say no because he's the attorney. But I will tell you that I'm not the most conservative one in the room when I talk to a lot of these associations. you know, they like to be able to send something out to the community that's saying, in consultation with management and our attorney, we've decided not to open the clubhouse. But usually that's their decision. They're the ones that are being conservative because they really take the responsibility of protecting their residents very, very seriously. I've been impressed by that. I'm not, you know, I mean, I'm the one telling, well, you do have the ability to be a little bit more flexible. You can open that up if you keep the protocols in place, but a lot of them are being very, very careful, and I think they're
I don't disagree, and I think, well, a lot of them are being very careful and cautious, and the backlash from the residents has certainly not been fair to board members, and it's on both sides, board members that opened their facilities and then the ones that didn't. It's difficult times, and the board members trying to balance what's right for the community, what's right for the
Jerry, don't you think that I mean, haven't you had some of I'm sure you've had talks with some of your boards where you've kind of decided as a group, you know something, I'd kind of rather be on the board that got criticized for opening things up a little bit late than being criticized for opening things up a little bit early. And I think I've had that discussion with a lot of associations about opening the facilities.
No, I think it depends on the communities. It depends on if they have an on-site manager, if they don't, the staff that they have, if they have the ability for somebody to go in and sanitize. So, but again, I agree with you, Lou, that every single board has taken it to heart and has tried their best to do what's right by their community. So,
I've been impressed. Hey, you get on a board, you know, you think you're making a decision about trimming trees, and now you're making a decision about protecting people's lives. I mean, you know, it's not what all of us bargained for. The running joke in my house for the last year is nobody can open up their pool unless they call Lou Caplan or one of his attorneys. You know, so it's gotten to that. But you know, that's the reality. And it's funny the associations have really. It's been a busy time for association attorneys, and it's because most associations and boards want to be able to say in their letter that goes out. You read the next time you see a letter goes out from your community giving you an update about opening facilities, it almost always says, you know, after discussion with our manager and our attorney, you know, they all want to have kind of that level of protection because they want the community to know that, you know, that they're looking to what they consider experts and advice to make these hard decisions.
They're looking to blame you and me, Lou.
Well, I mean, you know, that's one way of saying it. I didn't want to say it that way. Go ahead, Arthur. Hi, Arthur.
Hi, Lou. How are you?
Good. Nice.
I'm not shilling for you, but I do want to mention this. As a result of the document that you developed for us here at Boca West, we opened our pool approximately 2 months ago. We had 50 some odd people sign up to use the pool, but I will tell you from personal experience, no more than 5 or 6 people are there at any one time with their own spray, making sure they take care of the furniture. And there's a list posted right in front of the pool on the board with all the things that indicated they had signed and the county regulations about social distancing. So it's worked extremely well, and I compliment you based on the fact that that document that you developed had to be signed by every individual to exempt the board from any potential lawsuit based upon contacting COVID-19. So once again, I thank you so much.
Thanks, Arthur. Thank you. It's nice to meet you.
You know what, I want to say something that on the council's website and emails that we sent out to our member communities was that Eric Call from Palm Beach County Parks and Recs would give us updates on what Parks and Recs were doing and what their guidelines were for us to pass on to our communities. And I know Eric's not on this Zoom call, but we appreciate his help as well as everybody else in the county that was trying to keep us up to date so we could push the information out into the communities. Does anybody else have any questions?
Go ahead, Rosalind.
Yeah, so at one point, of course, our pool was closed and our gym was closed, but we have opened those up. But we have not opened up our soccer fields and our basketball courts. And so we have some owners who who threaten not to pay their dues. Because they say, well, what are we paying for if we can't use all our facilities? Can they do that?
No. No, I mean, lack of use of facilities is really not a defense of paying your assessments. You know, that kind of pressure does kind of wear on the board, it kind of wears on management, and kind of creates some, you know, combativeness and sometimes some altercations and the like. So you do need to take it seriously. I have a feeling that you've probably limited opening some of those other facilities because those seem to encourage more group activities, and it's going to be hard to monitor group activities on a basketball court as well as a soccer field. And then, you know, now we have to bring in, do we have to bring in more staff to monitor to make sure people are distancing and the like. So I can understand that, although it sounds like, hey, why wouldn't we open up a soccer field? That's a lot better than opening up a cafe. But the reality is that a soccer field, without it being monitored, you know, you can have 22 people playing soccer at a single time.
Exactly.
So that's kind of the rationale, I assume. Yeah. So thank you for saying that is. But you know, so those are tough decisions. But no, I mean it's political pressure. It's pressure. But if someone says I'm not going to pay my assessment, they've kind of made a bad strategic decision because they can get a lien against their property. And the beauty of a beauty of failure to pay assessments, I guess the beauty from a lawyer's standpoint, is that if we lien, we can foreclose that lien even if it is their homestead, because in Florida, you know, your failure to pay assessments really creates a super lien, and people can lose their homes even if it's their homestead for not paying their assessments to their condo or their HOA.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Anybody else? I don't see anybody else hand raised or anybody else that has any questions. So thank you, Lou. As always, you're most informative, entertaining, informative, and we leave a lot smarter than when we came in. It is much appreciated. And to West Boca Community Council board members, thank you, Captain Moss, Lieutenant Johnson, Chief DeVito, thank you for participating. Terry Mitzi, thank you for updating us. We most appreciate your help, and together we'll all get through this.
Sherry, I'm going to make one other comment. Next time I see all of you, other than Captain Moss, I'm giving you all a hug. All right?
You'll shake with it, right?
Come on.
Come on.
No hugs.
For our next meeting, we will send out an email blast to everybody. We'll also have it up on our website so that you know the days. And yeah, typically we have it on the second Tuesday, but because of Valentine's Day and Mr. Caplan not being available, we're trying to be accommodating, and we are finding it to be successful. And not just having it on Tuesdays, because a lot of people I know that are attending tonight typically have another meeting on Tuesday. So we're happy to see everybody, and we will see you all again very soon. Thank you all for coming. Thank you again, Lou.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.